In this video, I will go over some general characteristics for species of this week and specifically talk about three families: Erethizontidae, Heteromyidae, and Dipodidae, and how to ID these. So in general, let's back up and talk about everything that's happening this week. So last week was the squirrels and the beaver and the pocket gopher. All of those were cyeromorphic. This week, everything we're looking at, except the porcupine, which I'll talk about in a second, is myomorphic. So cyeromorphic, you may remember, means that there's this kind of flat plate without big holes. By contrast, myomorphic here, you can see in both of these, if you look just on the other side of the nose, you should be able to see these very narrow, vertical, kind of triangular shaped slits, rather than the flat plate that you saw last week. So on all of our mice and rats, you're going to see that. On the smaller ones, it's the same thing, but less obvious to see on the film. Also, everything this week, including the porcupine, has no post-orbital process. All of the squirrels have a post-orbital process. Next week, when we get to the voles and the muskrat, we're going to talk about a different type of post-orbital process. This week, if you look top down at the skull, you don't see any post-orbital process. All right. So everything this week is myomorphic except the porcupine, which is hystricomorphic. So let's talk about that. Family Erethizontidae, our species is Erethizon dorsatum, the porcupine. First thing to notice is that it's quite large. Second thing to notice is these massive holes right in the front. Now these are really different than the ones that I was just showing with the mice and rats that were more vertical. These are just wide and round and unlike any other skull you're going to see. So when you're thinking about how to organize all this information, making your own key, for example, this might be one of the first species you split off because nothing else is like this. So step one, is it a porcupine? No. Next. Right. So up here, I have huge infraorbital foramen. That's what the IOF stands for. That's the hole. And this type of hole, based on what the muscle attachment is called hystricomorphic. All right, now I want to touch on two other families. First, we have family Heteromyidae. So this is the kangaroo rat and the pocket mouse. Something that is special about these, compared to the other, say, mice and rats, is, and we'll see if you can get a clear view through here, there's a perforated nasal septum, meaning there's a hole that goes straight through the side of the snout. And if I pull out the smaller skull here, the pocket mouse, you should be able to see on this also, there's a hole right in the side of the nose. It goes all the way through. So that's one way to tell this family apart. Another thing that is worth noting is that the top incisor, so that's what the capital I is grooved. Meaning if you look at the front face, there's kind of a groove running vertically down the side, kind of splitting each tooth in two. There are other rodents that have this though, so it's not unique to Heteromyidae, but if it looks like a mouse skull and it has a perforated nasal septum, then it's probably one of these two. But one more thing you can check is the number of cheek teeth. So here, 4/4 means it has 4 upper cheek teeth and 4 lower cheek teeth, in contrast to the other groups of mice and rats that we have up here. So once we've figured out that it is Heteromyidae, which species are we looking at? So in terms of the skull, well, first of all, our pocket mouse is smaller than a kangaroo rat. skull is quite a bit smaller. But the other thing is the mastoid process here. So this is the bit of bone kind of just behind the auditory bullae. And let's see if I can get a good view of this. So what you're looking at is this bit of bone right here. On the kangaroo rat, you can see how it's so enormous, it's swollen, it's basically just spilling out of the bone. It's like spilling out of the skull. Here, that bit kind of behind the auditory bullae is quite large. If you compared it to another mouse, that bit of the skull is quite large, but it's still not overflowing in how enormous it is. Versus here, you just see how huge it is. And while the camera's here, you may be able to see on the top incisors the groove on each tooth. So when I say grooved incisor, that's what I mean. If it's not grooved, that means that surface is just smooth. In terms of the skin then, both of these have external cheek pouches. And we talked about that last week with the pocket gopher. It's a similar thing. Let me try to just figure out which one is the best one. If you look at these, you can see a line kind of along the side. So there's a line kind of on that side of the face. There's a line there. That's the external cheek pouch where they can store food, and that makes these two different than the other mice and rats that we have. That's why we call this a pocket mouse, because that's the pocket. Apart from the pocket, it looks similar to the other mice and rats, so that would be something to look for. That is the pocket mouse. The kangaroo rat looks rather different. So it's larger and it has these really long hind limbs. So given the size, the cheek pouches, long tail, really long hind limbs, big animal, this is a kangaroo rat, the other one is a pocket mouse. All right, so I also want to talk about family Dipodidae. This is the jumping mouse. For the skull, it has 4 upper cheek teeth over 3 lower cheek teeth. And the other thing is that it has a very large infraorbital foramen. So here, you can see, compared to the really narrow vertical slit, this is a lot wider and more oval. Still is kind of vertical, and otherwise this skull looks like a mouse skull, but that kind of larger circle is a key that this is Dipodidae and not some other family. And the upper incisors are also grouped. So we've got large infraorbital foramen, grooved incisor, number of cheek teeth. We should be able to figure out that it's this family. The only species in this family that we're asking you to ID is Zacus princeps. Now for the skin, it's got a very, very, very long tail. And the hind limbs are also slightly enlarged, not quite as extreme as the kangaroo rat, but it has long feet and this super long tail and a regular mouse-sized body. It's the only species we have like that. One last thing is that there are scales on this tail, which is in contrast to some of the species we'll look at, say, like the pack rat or the deer mouse. Some species have scales, some don't. This one does.